On June 22, 1941, more than 3,000 German Nazi troops suddenly launched an invasion of the Soviet Union, with a massive operation across three wide fronts, known as Operation Barbarossa. Along with this unprecedented invading force, Hitler brought a completely new weapon, the first of its kind in the history of human warfare. This weapon nearly forced the Soviet army to suffer a bitter defeat right from the early days of World War II. It was the Karl Gerrit, the largest and most legendary self-propelled mortar ever built by humanity. The Germans used only one Karl Gerrit, with just 36 rounds, but it successfully destroyed the legendary Brest fortress, tearing apart the entire fortified defensive line and leaving Soviet leader Joseph Stalin completely stunned and horrified. From this shocking event, nations around the world began to recognize its value and quickly researched and produced their own mortars. This marked the special importance of this weapon in dividing power and territory between the two main sides, the Axis and the Allies, throughout the war. Many people think the era of mortars only truly began to emerge in the 1940s, but in reality they had appeared much earlier, hundreds of years before humanity entered the two world wars. So, over more than 165 years since their birth and development, how have mortars undergone powerful transformations and major advancements? All of this will be revealed in detail in today's historical journey with Warfront Legacy. Mortars are often called by various names, such as mortar or indirect fire gun. They are one of the four basic types of firepower in modern artillery forces. The most prominent feature of mortars is their smoothbore barrel and high arcing trajectory with a very large elevation angle, usually over 45 degrees and sometimes up to nearly 90 degrees. You will see that the structure of this weapon is extremely simple and easy to understand. It consists only of a bipod, a long barrel, a sturdy base plate, and a basic sight. At the bottom of the barrel is a fixed firing pin. When a mortar round is dropped from the muzzle, it falls freely to the bottom, strikes the firing pin, ignites the propellant charge, and launches the round far away on a high arcing path. Mortar rounds can reach a maximum range of about 6 kilometers depending on the type, and soldiers can easily adjust the range by changing the amount of supplemental propellant attached to the tail of the round. It might seem that with just a few simple definitions we can easily identify and understand this weapon. However, in reality, many people still confuse the two common concepts, guns and mortars. So, before we officially dive into the journey exploring the history of mortar development, please take about 2 minutes Warfront Legacy to clearly distinguish the similarities and differences between guns and mortars. First, in terms of primary purpose, both weapons were created with the common goal of providing fire support for infantry, destroying enemy personnel, combat vehicles, or fortified firing points. They both operate on the same basic principle, using gas pressure from exploding propellant or special mixtures to propel the projectile. This is the main similarity. That's why, in accurate definitions, mortars are often called mortar guns, to highlight the connection. But the differences are very clear. Guns are typically used for long-range firing with a flatter trajectory and the ability to fire directly, so the elevation angle ranges from -7 degrees to +70 degrees. In contrast, mortars specialize in high arcing fire to destroy targets hidden behind obstacles like walls, concrete bunkers, mountain gaps, or large barriers, so the elevation angle is limited from 45 degrees upward to as much as 86 degrees. Guns usually load from the breech, while most mortars load from the muzzle, except for some large caliber mortars from 120 mm upward, which have different mechanisms. Gun barrels typically have rifling, known as grooves, to spin the projectile for better accuracy. But mortars are almost always smoothbore. There are exceptions though. Some mortars have rifled barrels for direct fire, and some smoothbore guns are mainly used on tanks with fin-stabilized projectiles. All guns require towing vehicles, or are fixed on combat platforms like tanks or warships. Most mortars, however, are designed to be man-portable, because they need to stay close to infantry for direct support. So their construction is very simple, easy to assemble, disassemble, quick to transport, and they have a much higher rate of fire than guns. To distinguish guns from mortars by appearance, The easiest way is to look at the intermediate part that transfers recoil to the ground. Guns have complex recoil systems with trails and wheels, while mortars have a simple flat base plate. However, some mortars mounted on vehicles no longer have a base plate. Another way to distinguish is by the shape of the ammunition. Gun projectiles are usually long cylindrical with aerodynamic pointed noses, while mortar rounds have a distinctive teardrop shape, widest near the middle where the guidance band is attached, and taper toward both the nose and tail. We have now thoroughly analyzed the similarities and differences between guns and mortars. Hopefully, this concise but detailed information clears up everyone's questions. And now, let's return to the main content of today's video. In reality, mortars have existed for hundreds of years, first widely used in siege warfare during the Middle Ages. At that time, they were bulky iron structures, very heavy and extremely difficult to move. Typical early mortars include the Pumhart von Steyr, produced in Austria and used in combat from the early 15th century. It weighed about 8 tons, with a length of up to 2.59 meters, and had virtually no mobility. However, its destructive power was enormous. Historical calculations show that a stone ball 80 centimeters in diameter, weighing 690 kilograms, could fly about 600 meters after loading 15 kilograms of gunpowder at a 10-degree elevation. However, mortars were not widely used in Europe during Napoleon's era, and they were not yet taken seriously as a weapon. That changed in the mid-19th century when the American Civil War broke out on April 12, 1861. At that time, General Ulysses Grant, who later became U.S. President, ordered the creative production of mortars using the hardest wood available, shaped into 6 or 12-pound projectiles reinforced with strong iron bands. They were called Coehorn mortars. Across the ocean, the Germans also learned lessons from the bloody naval battle at Port Arthur in 1904 to 1905, where standard heavy guns could not destroy fortified defenses like barbed wire and concrete bunkers. This led to the development of a short-barreled, muzzle-loading mortar called the Minenwerfer in 1910. It was produced in 3 main calibers, 7.58 centimeters, 17 centimeters, and 25 centimeters. When World War I erupted in 1914, the German army went to war with more than 160 Minenwerfers of various types. They achieved legendary victories in Belgium and France, destroying supposedly impregnable fortresses. However, the true foundation for modern mortars was not laid in Germany, but in Britain. In 1915, British Baron Wilfred Stokes invented the modern mortar, named after him, a type that could be carried by just 2 soldiers. It consisted of a simple, smooth metal tube fixed to a sturdy base plate, with a total weight of only 47.17 kilograms, including ammunition. The Stokes mortar could fire up to 25 rounds per minute, with a maximum range of 732 meters. By the time World War II broke out, the British had improved it to a new level, 30 rounds per minute, and a range of up to 2,286 meters, with various specialized rounds. The Germans were not far behind. They rapidly improved the Minenwerfer to counter the Stokes, and mass-produced it at an impressive rate of up to 4,300 units per month. The French illegally copied the Stokes design and named their improved versions the Brandt ML 27mm and 31mm. At just the right time, mortars proved especially useful in the muddy, wet, and cramped trenches of the European battlefields during World War I. They were improved to be lighter, simpler to operate, relatively accurate, and allowed infantry to deliver powerful fire support instantly, equivalent to traditional artillery. Essentially, these weapons became the standard prototype for all light mortars developed worldwide in the following years. When Nazi leader Adolf Hitler launched the invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, the world officially entered the darkest chapter in human history, World War II. Humanity had never witnessed such a powerful and rapid rise of weapons as at this time, and mortars were no exception to this evolution. Some notable mortars from this period include the Hedgehog, an anti-submarine mortar developed by the British Royal Navy in November 1940. The Hedgehog was a system of 24 clustered tubes, each preloaded with an approximately 183 mm anti-submarine round containing up to 14 kilograms of high explosive. When sonar detected an enemy submarine, all 24 rounds were fired simultaneously into the sea, creating a circular impact pattern with a 70-meter diameter over the suspected submarine area, with a range of up to 250 meters. The crew could reload the entire system in just 3 minutes for a second salvo. Extremely fast, extremely dangerous, and highly effective. And we certainly cannot overlook the super mortar with the largest barrel ever built by humans. Little David. It was produced by the U.S. Army in 1945 but ready for use from 1944, intended to clear heavily fortified defenses in Japan's mainland territory if an invasion was needed. The design was basically no different from ordinary mortars, except for its extremely massive 914mm caliber. Due to the complex mechanism, it could be moved but took 12 hours to transition from travel to combat mode. Still much easier than the German 800mm guns, which needed up to 3 weeks to prepare. Each Little David round weighed up to 1.6 tons, loaded from the muzzle, but because of the enormous weight, the barrel had to be lowered after each shot for reloading, and then raised again. Extremely time-consuming. But the destructive power was undeniable. U.S. Army tests showed it could destroy any bunker or fortress used by Japan during World War II with a single shot. Fortunately, the United States never had to use it in actual combat. If you want to see this colossal masterpiece up close, visit the grounds of the museum at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, USA. It's the only one in the world on display there. However, following the flow of modern history, mortars have also become highly motorized. From being carried by human power, they are now mounted on various vehicles like tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, military pickup trucks, or even adapted civilian vehicles. All these improvements have opened a new era for this classic infantry weapon, indispensable in the armed forces of nations worldwide. In 1957, the Soviet Union developed the heavy 420mm self-propelled mortar called the 2B1 Oka, the most powerful in the world at the time, designed to fire tactical nuclear rounds. Then in 1972 they introduced its superior successor, the 2S4 Tiopan, also known as Tulip. This is the heaviest self-propelled mortar in the world, making many military powers fall silent. Looking at the design, you can see it's basically a heavy 2B8 240mm mortar, mounted on a modified tracked mine-laying vehicle chassis. But the 240mm caliber is what sets it apart from self-propelled mortars of other nations like the US, Britain, France, and Germany, where the largest caliber stops at 120mm. This allows the Tiopan to use a wide variety of rounds: standard high explosive, incendiary, cluster, smart guided, tactical nuclear, and even neutron warheads. From 1967, the Soviets developed a special 240mm round with a nuclear warhead yielding up to 2 kilotons. In 1970, they created an active rocket 230 km round carrying a nuclear warhead with an 18-kilometer range. And in 1983, the laser-guided 1K113 Smelchak round was born, allowing target designation by laser with almost no time for the enemy to react or intercept. With such a diverse ammunition arsenal, to this day, the Soviet and later Russian Tulip self-propelled mortar has no true rival. In particular, no air defense system in the world has been confirmed capable of successfully intercepting its rounds. With extended-range ammunition, the 2S4 Tiopan can even flatten entire high-rise buildings or destroy heavily armored enemy vehicles at up to 20 kilometers with a single shot. The fragmentation damage radius can cover an area 4 times the size of a standard soccer field. That's enough for us to imagine just how terrifying the destructive power of the world's heaviest mortar truly is. However, one thing few people notice is that the basic design of mortars has changed very little from their invention to the present day. The only things that have truly evolved significantly are the ammunition and modern sighting systems. Even mortar tactics over more than 165 years have not changed much. But because mortars are inherently not highly accurate, they must fire in rapid salvos to quickly deplete enemy forces, up to 20 or even 30 rounds per minute. So supplying ammunition is always a major logistical challenge, requiring mechanized vehicles dedicated to transporting rounds to sustain fire in large battles. To this day, mortars remain one of the cheapest weapons, but compared to the effectiveness they deliver on the battlefield, they are clearly an indispensable ace for any modern infantry force. From the American Civil War, The first conflict where mortars were used systematically and on a large scale. Right up to the present, they have maintained their important position. In fact, in the future, mortars will certainly continue to be modernized and improved for many decades to come. And so, our fascinating journey exploring the history of mortar development comes to an end today. What do you think about this unique weapon? Please share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below the video so we can discuss them together. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any military history journeys with Warfront Legacy in the future. For now, goodbye and see you in the next videos.